No, it's practice mode right now. I have to broadcast it. It's recording though. So we can cut this part out. Yeah.
So mute Yeti Nano. Are you ready?
Really?
Hey guys,
We're just gonna wait a couple minutes.
and let us know if you guys can hear us. I think you guys can.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
We're just gonna wait for people to settle down and trickle in.
Hello, Miss Lam. We see you. Just give us a couple minutes.
Yeah. Good morning, guys. Okay, we're just gonna wait for like a few more seconds before we start. Okay. All right. I think some people are still coming in, so we're gonna keep on waiting. Should we?
Yeah, we can just give a little introduction about ourselves.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of Boss Up Summit. If you're new here,
I'm Joanna.
and I'm Jessie.
We hope you're all doing very well. Just before we introduce our very first speaker of the day, we just wanted to thank everybody who is taking time out of their weekends to come watch us and listen to all of the amazing advice from all of our speakers. This year, we have created Boss Up Summit, which is an online event that brings leaders across North America to come speak about leadership and career opportunities for all the youth who are here right now.
So we have a very exciting lineup today. We will be starting with Miranda Lam, a leading lawyer in Canada, Kenneth Harris, an engineer with the Aerospace Corporation, and Soham Khatan, another Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur in the educational sector.
As we're interviewing all of our speakers today, feel free to ask any questions that you may have in the Q&A section on Zoom.
Yeah, so let's go ahead. Ms. Lam, we're just going to promote you as panelists right now, just to prepare you.
Hi, Ms. Lam.
Hi, Ms. Lam. Good morning.
It's nice to see both of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
My pleasure. And hello to everybody out in cyber world.
Yeah. We do have like a very broad demographic with us today. So
yeah. We just wanted to first say that we really appreciate your generosity and we're really excited to chat with you. Before we get started, we're just going to give the audience a brief introduction about you.
Yeah. So Lam is a partner at McCarthy Terrell LLP, who is a highly regarded commercial litigator and trusted business advisor to private and public enterprises across Canada and worldwide. Alongside many other awards, in 2018, she was named to Vancouver Magazine's Power 50 list of the city's most influential people and has previously been identified as a leading lawyer under 40 by Lexpert in 2017. Ms. Lam is passionate about building communities and workplaces that enable everyone to be their authentic selves so people can work together to bring about positive change. Once again, thank you so much, Ms. Lam, for joining us today. And we know you have something to share first, so we'll pass the mic on to you.
Oh, sure. I don't know so much about sharing. I just thought I would maybe give a little background on myself, maybe to set some context for any questions. And I'll say right now, even though I can't see anyone else, and I don't really know who you are. In any case, if you have any questions, please just feel free. This is a judgment-free zone, so feel free to ask whatever you would like, and I'm happy to do my best to answer your questions about whatever it may be. I was very excited to get the invitation to speak to all of you, just because I think we need more of these kinds of events. You might not all want to be on Zoom very much these days because we're all on Zoom so much, but I think these kinds of events are really important, just to bring awareness, get a good dose of inspiration. If you're logging on to this from wherever you are in the world, it's 10 a.m. here in Vancouver on a Sunday, so that's pretty good commitment for most of you. So it's really exciting to be here. Just a little bit on myself. You've heard what my law firm likes to say if you go and read my law firm bio. But I am born and raised in Vancouver. I did go to school also here in Vancouver, and I ultimately went to UBC for law school. As you've heard, I'm a litigation partner at McCarthy Tétrault. McCarthy Tétrault, what's that? It is a big law firm. We have about 1,600 employees across the country, about 600 lawyers, depending on what magazine you read or what ranking you want to look at. We're number one or number two in any number of practice areas. It's a terrific place to work in a firm like ours. We get the privilege of working with enterprises across the country and help them solve some really interesting and exciting, maybe sometimes not as exciting for the clients, but exciting problems. And in my own personal capacity, I get to work with wonderful people across the country because we have offices here and in all the other major financial centers across the country, as well as in New York and London. So some wonderful, smart, creative people who are really committed to teamwork and delivering excellent results for their clients. My practice as a litigator means I go to court. It also means oftentimes I'm working to avoid people going to court. I have any number of types of disputes on my desk at any given time. I do a lot of commercial or business disputes. That's basically the core to my practice. I also am our retail sector lead nationally for our retail and consumer markets groups. I also work a lot with different kinds of retailers and brands on all kinds of issues that they may have. Outside of law, which sometimes is more exciting and more interesting, I have two kids at home. One is 5 and he's in grade 1, and the other is my husband. So that's my home life, and I have one sibling who also lives still now here in the Lower Mainland, and has a little person as well. And my family still live here in the Lower Mainland as well. Regrettably, with COVID, we don't see each other as much, but as you can see, I'm really a homegrown person in that I have stayed here and am still here in Vancouver. So for those of you who have ventured farther away and are logging in from elsewhere, big welcome to you. And I'm just a little jealous that you've managed to wend your way elsewhere. So that's all I've got just for context, just in case that sort of helps kick any of the questions off. So I'll turn it back over to both of you, John and Jesse.
Yeah, thank you. We both also grew up in Vancouver, so we definitely resonate with what you were saying. Vancouver's awesome, and people who aren't from here should definitely visit.
Preferably during spring where there isn't as much rain, but yeah,
it's been rainy.
We're just going to start off with a couple of our own questions, and we of course welcome any questions in the Q&A section.
Yeah, don't be shy. I know the first few questions can be a little daunting, but yesterday people started asking questions later on, so everyone take it at your own pace.
Yeah. Do you want to, or
I'll start with the first one. So Ms. Lam, you've mentioned you're a commercial litigator. Could you give us a bit of an inside look on how your day is as a commercial litigator?
Sure. It really depends on what's going on. So maybe instead of giving you a sense of my day, I can, without violating the rules of solicitor-client privilege, I can tell you a little bit about some of the cases that I'd be working on. So on any given day, I might get a call that, for example, there's a transaction underway, a merger and an acquisition, and it's falling apart. That's quite common right now, unfortunately, because of COVID. The economic terms have changed. Some businesses might not be worth as much as they were before because they're not generating the kind of revenue they should be, and one side wants to walk away. So the question is, well, how do we stop that party from doing so? And what do we need to do quickly? Um, I've also had situations in the last couple of weeks where a particular retail brand, they are expecting a certain delivery through their supply chain, and it's not happening because, again, of COVID. And their supplier has said, you know what, I can't make this widget anymore because I need these and these ingredients, and I don't have these and these parts because they're backed up somewhere else down the supply chain. But my client has committed to delivering those to all of these various stores and selling them. So now what do you do? I have situations where people have come together to form a company, and unfortunately, one of those people isn't maybe pulling his or her weight anymore, and probably should be exited from the business. How do you do that? How do you do it in a way that sees everyone get fair value? And I've had situations where, for example, a business has been hacked into by cyber criminals. And so how do you manage that? And what do you need to do quickly? And how do you deal with all your customers whose information has gone out into the big old world? And then there's stuff like someone's at XYZ store. They don't want to wear a mask. They're threatening my employees. How do I manage that? And right through to, I've just figured out my CEO is stealing. What do I need to do to get him out of there? Figure out if anything else has gone wrong in the business. Oh, and by the way, he's taken our secret sauce and he's setting up a competing business. Please help, and please help right now. The day can be extremely interesting, and oftentimes I have my own list of things that I plan on doing, and I may not get through that whole list just because you never know what else comes rolling in the door, or on the phone or in your email. On top of that, because I do work in a large environment and with a number of people as a partner, and certainly as a member of the firm, there is an expectation, and most people want to be working closely with their team, but also mentoring, helping with training, attending meetings to sort of keep the business going. So there's that whole component to it as well, which is actually what makes it fun and rewarding to work in a large workplace.
I see. Thank you for that. I was just also wondering, was commercial litigation a field that you had expected yourself to go into? I know you went to law school, so law was obviously intentional, but just specifically this realm of law.
It's a good question. I get that actually quite a bit. A number of years ago, I used to co-chair our recruiting committee, and where we would interview law students to hire them in as summer and articling students. And students asked me that a lot, and I had to really think, because in some ways it's been a bit of inertia. I did always want to go to law school, and I'm not really sure why. I do enjoy speaking, as you can probably tell, and I enjoy debating issues and ideas, not necessarily arguing, but just, debating and learning about things, which I figured out is actually very, very important if you are interested in law, is to be curious and to want to be interested in figuring out how things work and hopefully how to solve some problems. But I think I fell into the commercial litigation because I like puzzles, I like people, I like stories. I do, as I say, like to figure out how things work. Um, Having been homegrown, I was really interested and committed to seeing how things work to make our community go as well, and how do things work to make our province and our country go. It's, I've been joking about being homegrown. Ironically, in my job now, before COVID, I traveled a lot. So had lots of opportunities to work with and meet people all over the world. And it always comes back to like, and how do you do things in British Columbia or in Canada? And what's the law like there? So it's been a really interesting ride there. But for me, how did I come to this area? It was in many ways following my own interest and a bit of inertia, and also knowing a little bit of what I didn't think I would enjoy. I had the benefit of I received a clerkship after law school, so that means that I spent a year at the Supreme Court and worked with a series of judges, and which was a great privilege and so much fun. And in that capacity, I saw all kinds of cases, criminal, family, as well as a lot of civil cases. And the family cases just broke my heart, and the criminal cases were really exciting, but I seem to like civil procedure more than criminal procedure. So I kind of just, started to narrow it down as I continued along my own journey.
Yeah, you have a lot of very interesting experiences. We had actually also read about you serving as a judicial law court clerk for 5 different British Columbia Supreme Court justices after graduating. Um, so our question sort of is, do you have any tips regarding sort of confidence that you would recommend to youths who are working around adults or who are other people with more experience than them, especially ones that they are working with or may potentially work with in the future?
Yeah. Um, I've always been one of the youngest people in the environment that I'm in. Maybe not so much anymore, now I'm old, but I went to law school. I was, I think, like the second or third youngest person in law school because I didn't finish my undergrad. I went straight to law school. Um, and so naturally, as a result, I was younger than most of my classmates, and then one of the younger people entering into the workforce at that point in time. So, what do you do about confidence? And what do you do about confidence when, let's face it, you're female in a mostly male environment? And I think I can say this because there's an Asian discount when it comes to age, right? Like we look younger than we do, generally speaking. So I looked like I was 12 when I was 21. And so I think when I'm 80, I'm going to really appreciate this Asian discount. But certainly, especially when I started law school and then went through the whole job hunting process, I am not sure I looked or sounded like what a typical lawyer would be like. So to come back to your question on confidence, a lot of it is, frankly, and this is going to sound cheesy, but believing in yourself, knowing that, I mean, you got there just like anyone else. So there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to continue to be there and grab whatever that brass ring is because you're there too. The reality is you do look different. You may sound different. You may not look typical. I do think that's changing. I think that's changing a lot. And I think diversity and inclusion is an authentic and sincere priority for most organizations, even universities, who've always been very sort of broad-based in terms of admissions. So I think the environments are starting to change. But I think part of the finding confidence is making sure you coach yourself into remembering that you do belong there, even if nobody else looks like you. The other part of it is actually to be you and not to be someone else. When I started, one of the first cases, and when I started, I worked at another a big firm, and lots of men, lots of guys, lots of old white guys. And one of the first cases I got staffed on involved a chain of restaurants. And we were going to go and talk to some of the staff at this chain of restaurants. And the partner in charge of the matter came into my office and said, you're going to help on this file and you're going to come with me to this meeting. And I thought, oh, this is so exciting. And he wasn't actually that old at the time. Like, this is all back in my memory, right? But to me, he was like an intimidating senior partner, white male. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go with you, and I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to take notes, and I'm going to be a really dutiful loyal. I was a student at the time, um, and we showed up, and nobody really wanted to talk to him, because if you think about the staff at a chain restaurant, they're all in their 20s, they're all young, and the partner looks like their dad. So they're certainly not going to be telling him what they think is going on and what the problem was. So, to his credit, he figured that out pretty quickly. And he said, you know what, we should divide up. He goes, how about you take these people and I'll take these people? And I think he was pretty deliberate about making sure I was generally talking to the younger folks, younger women, and he quickly recognized, I think, the situation, which I really appreciate now, because that became a great experience for me in terms of interviewing witnesses, finding facts, figuring out whether or not there was indeed a problem in that environment, going back and working with him on, what the issues were, and then actually having the chance to meet with the senior management of that particular company to go through the issues with them and make recommendations, which I wouldn't have otherwise been able to do just as like a student sitting in, the broom closet office, being invited by being asked to do this from a more senior person. So that's why I say be you. Don't try to be someone else, because it's not going to work, and you're the most excellent version of yourself anyway, and have confidence that that is going to be the best way in terms of enabling you to do your best work, and also be included on all the right things.
We've touched on it briefly, but I feel like for minorities, the confidence component can come a little harder, especially like I'm talking about like ethnically. As like an Asian American Canadian, sorry. Are there any like tips you would give people who struggle with that aspect of confidence in relations to their background?
I think I don't know. I'm not sure if there's a generalized observation about that, but I will say that there's a lot of research out there about uh, bias, and there's a lot of research out there about uh, confidence. And so I'll share a couple of interesting things. The statistic that blew my mind was you do a lot of memos in law at the beginning, and when you're a student, a first or second year associate, you're doing a lot of research, you're preparing a lot of legal memos. The television shows don't show that. I just saw the question about Suits, so life is not as exciting as Suits. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but in any case, coming back to your question, you do a lot of research, and one interesting study that I've seen is that this memo the names will be stripped out of it and circulated to a bunch of partners. This study was done in the US. And if you put, if you clip a picture of a white male to the memo, it will be graded more highly than if you attach a picture of an African American male. So given this day and age, and the era that we live in, that's probably regrettably not surprising. What is more surprising to me is that that same result happens when you ask African American partners to grade the memos. So somewhere in all of our subconsciousness as a BIPOC person, somewhere we have all picked up that to be a lawyer, and I'm using this example, you need to look a certain way, you need to maybe sound a certain way, your name maybe needs to be so, even for the people who are of that very same community. And so I don't blame anybody necessarily about any of that. There's just this crazy inertia, like history, years and years of stereotypes, and understanding that somehow has become embedded in all of us, that even a Black person would prefer the legal opinion of a white person, even though they're the same. Now, this study was done, I can't remember now, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But to me, it's a great opportunity, because the minute that study gets announced and people start talking, right? You talk about why is that? And to your question about, like, is there bias and how do you overcome that? As much as this is about all of us, I just told all of you to believe in yourself and do you and be your best version of you. That study illustrates that the system also has to change. So it's one thing to, be a super strong flower. You still need lots of sunshine, and you need some rain, and you need some good soil. And so that's on all of us as people who are in the workforce, who are about to go into the workforce, as leaders in the workforce, to call that stuff out, to start talking about it, and to ask why. And not in the, like, you're a racist crazy person, and so you must be bad, but in the, like, why does that happen? And how does that happen? And how can we stop that from happening? Because clearly it's not fair, and it's obviously not right. That memo is the same. How can there be more errors, or how can it be less accurate just because the author is different? I mean, that's just makes no sense at all. So I think the system has to change as well. Until that does, how do you overcome some of that? It is having the dialogue that we're having. It is continuing to be unapologetically yourself, and to have confidence that you belong there as well, and to do your best work, and to recognize that you might sometimes sadly have to pedal just a little bit more than the other person. But when you make that breakthrough, you get to be part of changing the system as well. And you continue to work on changing the system. And I'm optimistic that one day things will be very, very different, and that memo study won't happen. So that's the bad news. I promised you one good statistic. In the States, they have done studies on what kind of lawyer is more credible in front of a jury. So jury trials are not very common here in Canada, at least not in the commercial context. But in the States, jury trials are like an everyday thing. So being credible in front of a jury, persuasive in front of a jury, is very, very important if you want to be a trial lawyer. And we've just talked about how there's this sort of you don't look like a lawyer bias that happens. Well, apparently the stereotypes work the other way too. And Asian Americans, and you, Jesse, you reminded me of that when you said Asian Americans. Asian Americans are seen as very credible counsel, because the stereotype is they're good at math, and they work hard, and they study, and they're good at school. So is that true? I don't know. Is that fair? Probably not. It's not as fair as, it's like the same thing, but just flipped. But that's the stereotype out there in terms of juries. So if you're thinking about, should I be a lawyer, and do I like speaking or whatever, don't let your fears dictate what you want to do. Give it a try first, because you have no idea what might lie ahead. So anyway, that's a very long answer to your short and very good question.
No, thank you. That was definitely something I think a lot of people could put in use. And
Yeah. I think there's a lot of research right now, especially in this current political climate, about especially subconscious bias that people don't even realize, and people who often talk about bias and who talk about like discrimination don't even realize sometimes it can be ingrained within ourselves, like you sort of talked about with the memo study.
That's right. That's exactly it. I mean, there's a question someone's just asked about, have I heard of implicit bias? Absolutely. I should say that at the firm right now, I'm the National Gender Equality Action Group chair. So I'm like steeped in all of this, because I read up on all this stuff. It's like my own personal passion. But more importantly, at the firm, it's one of our 3 pillars: diversity and inclusion, because we really recognize that we need to tackle things like implicit bias. I think in this day and age, people get that the overt stuff, the stuff that like really nobody even says, even in their inside voice. At least I hope people get that these days. What's more insidious is what you just said, this stuff that people might not even know about and may not be even intentional. And it's tricky and sometimes awkward because people don't know what they should be saying or what they can say. At our firm, we're rolling out unconscious bias training for everybody, for all staff and for all lawyers, because people sincerely want to have the tools to be equipped to communicate with each other in a way that is empowering and respectful. And sometimes people just don't even know that they might be saying something that isn't appropriate, or they might be making decisions that affect other people's compensation or their advancement through the firm in a way that's biased. So I'll give you an example that's probably easier at this stage. I won't talk about partnership admission. I'll come back to when we interview students. The way law firms do it, it used to be we'll take you for dinner, we'll take you for lunch. You come into the office, we chat with you. If we like you, we take you for dinner, for lunch. And we assume that you've got the table stakes or the grades. You've done well in school. You seem to have sort of all the right background. So let's just see if we fit. So you're going to hear a lot about fit. You hear a lot of that in any kind of job you're applying for. Is there a good fit? At our firm, and I'm not saying that's wrong because I think that is the way most people do it, we figured out that fit doesn't necessarily mean you're going to survive and thrive in our environment. So we took a step back and decided we need to look at what makes you a successful lawyer, a successful young lawyer at our firm. And we came up with 6 characteristics. And then around those characteristics, we built a bunch of interview questions to see if we could test or tease those characteristics out of you. And what we figured out and then we trained all of our interviewers to ask those questions and to come back at the end of the day so we could compare notes on those questions. And when we did that, we got a very different look to our law school class. We got a more diverse population. We got some people who were extroverts, some people who were introverts. We got younger people, older people, different races, different backgrounds, the whole gamut in terms of diversity. And it's become really, as I've seen these people grow through the firm, it's become really great because it not only increases the diversity of your environment, but there's research that says diverse teams solve for problems far better. So it actually makes a lot of sense as a business to have diverse teams. And we've certainly seen that. But more than that, it's been more fair because when it comes down to who you fit with and who you like, that kind of process is very much favors a certain kind of person, a person that looks like you probably, a person that you think you can get along with, a person who's probably more gregarious and outgoing, so more on the extroverted side. If you're good at interviews, you're probably pretty chatty, you're probably the life of the party. And so you don't get some of those introverts, and law is actually like a very introverted job in some ways. So that's one of the ways that we've tried to address the bias that is just inherent in all of us. And we run a drill when we train our interviewers where we do strip the names out of some of the resumes. And then we just go around the room and we ask people, what are your impressions and what do you think? And it's very interesting because everyone relates things to their own experience. So people are like, oh, well, I think he's a really good student because, and I was the chair at the time, so I got to, well, how do you know he's a he? And so it's a very interesting experience, and it also makes you think about the kinds of decisions that you make day to day and what your preferences are.
That's actually like a really interesting approach. Like I've never really like heard about like the sort of like logistical side of like removing biases when you're sort of electing employees. Do you think this is like an approach that's applicable to not just like law firms? Do you think it's something that all like realms should apply?
Yeah, I I do. I mean, it has to be tailored to your environment, but and I'm just noticing in the chat there's some more discussion about implicit biases that are unconscious biases. Yeah, those biases exist in all of us, and we deploy them in every environment that we're in, which is why discussions like this are so important, just to even make ourselves more aware of how we're thinking. I mean, this was a while ago because it was pre-COVID, but every time I go to a restaurant with my husband, I'm very conscious that when they come to bring the bill, they always give it to my husband. And it was actually my husband that pointed it out, because he's like, why do they just assume I'm going to pay? And so you can see how it kind of is everywhere you go. My husband is Caucasian. He is fair haired, fair skinned, um, tall white guy. And it's very interesting to me when we travel. People always say, where are you from? And we say Canada. And then they look at me and they say, yeah, but where are you really from? And, and so wherever you are, it certainly does exist. And so again, it's why it's good to be talking about these things without the attribution or without the blame, just so that we can start to maybe open our minds to other possibilities and hopefully eradicating some of this bias that exists in all of us.
Like you were saying, it's like a lot more of a systemic sort of condition, and I think definitely through companies using like what you guys use, that approach to select your employees, like that does help the to sort of resolve or minimize the systemic aspect of it.
Yeah, I think so. And there is training, there are formal programs for it, but I do think it just starts with calling it out and having the conversation.
Yeah, I think we have a few other questions just in the chat. The first is, what do you think will happen to sort of the future of your job? Do you think that there will be any major changes in how things are run, and will there be an increase in the sort of the use of technology?
It's a great question. Everyone's job is changing because of technology. I mean, there is just no doubt about it. And my personal view is that you should embrace it and figure out how it enhances your job. I don't think, and maybe this is like my own hopeful naivete, I don't think that technology can ever replace my own job entirely, because at the end of the day, my job is to be someone's trusted advisor, and that requires judgment, analysis, and opinion, and context. And machines are, at least right now, terrific at assisting us to do all of those things, but the final call you still, I think, need a human for. That being said, I've been doing this for 18 years or something. I will tell you, technology has already made lots of improvements to the way we practice law in a way that I think, and that's why I say you got to embrace it. When I started in litigation, one of the first phases in litigation after the lawsuit is filed and someone's responded is document discovery. And so when I started, depending on the case, there could be thousands, if not millions, of documents. And the young lawyers, the juniors, got sent to the warehouse or wherever those documents were stored. I have been sent to the Yukon to sit in a trailer above a running river and plowed through documents for like 3 weeks in the freezing cold, which is what I remember. And that's what you did. And you tried to distill everything down and figure out what was the smoking gun or what wasn't, what was the narrative. And then you had someone would copy all of these documents, someone would hand stamp them with all the numbers so that you could identify them later and then put them into binders. That doesn't happen anymore. There's certainly more information because we write emails like there's no tomorrow. There's texting. There's lots of paper. There's lots of documents and information out there. But technology now takes care of a lot of that stuff that I just told you about. So if that same case happened today, and we manage those cases every day, we have technology that crawls through all of the documents. So the junior associates are still in charge of documents, but now they're not reading every single one mindlessly and flipping through things and hoping that the box of documents goes away. They're thinking about, well, what are the issues? What are the key things going to be? What should I be telling the computer to look for? And they run the searches, they see what gets spit out, and then they start sort of refining things. And then they lead a team of people to actually review the documents that, sort of are spit out at the end of these various searches based on artificial intelligence. So there's still human review, but the first review now is done by AI. And then you're usually leading a team of people as opposed to doing it yourself. So you can see right away that's a different skill set already. You're leading a team of people to conduct that review. And then you distill it down further. And then after that, you use the technology to help you come up with, the exhibit books, the trial briefs, you're tagging it to transcripts and all of that stuff where technology actually makes it a lot easier. Technology has also changed the way, for example, companies do contracts. There are some contracts that companies enter into over and over and over again. So again, as a junior lawyer, you're plowing through all of these same kind of contracts, looking for what's different or how did this provision change over the years? Now, you've got technology that can do that. So again, instead of just, plowing through it and reading quickly, your job is to figure out what the issues are, get the computer to do some of that work, and then determine what the result is so you can give the client some advice about what the changes are that you've seen. So I think technology actually is terrific. I welcome it. We're working very hard to incorporate all kinds of different technology into our platform for that reason. But if whoever asked the question, if you're worried that maybe technology will take over the job and you're not, and that might discourage you from considering the profession, don't worry. I think you'll still have a job at the end of it.
Great, thank you for that.
Sort of to add on to that, you were talking sort of about being adaptable to all the changes that you've been making. Do you have any tips for any youth who are in this virtual room about how to become more adaptable or how to exercise this sort of muscle?
Boy, you guys have great questions. How to become more adaptable? I think behind all that is the desire is to be curious, is to be interested in things. So there are some things in my own life that I'm very rigid about. I'm very rigid about schedules. I'm very rigid about to-do lists. Like I confessed to you already, I may not get all of the stuff done, but I make lists anyway. That's just how I keep myself organized. But otherwise, that's very different from what I would say is being open, flexible, and curious about things. The job I have, and frankly, most jobs these days, are very much every day is different and every day is changing. So, and you're always learning about something different. I mean, I just told you that the kinds of cases I handle might all ultimately fall into certain kinds of buckets, like shareholder dispute or class action, securities class action. But that doesn't mean that the story is the same, because it never is. So, I have learned about how to build greenhouses. I have learned about how cans of soup get made. I have learned about, how mines are built. None of those things are really related to each other. So, except the key is to like learning and to be curious and to want to figure out how things work, which is something we talked about at the beginning. And that's what I think helps you become adaptable, is because you're open to new things and you're interested in what else is going on in the world. And be curious for curiosity's sake, not because you have to learn it or because someone has told you that you should read this, be interested. And naturally, some things are not going to be as interesting to you. And that is also one way to figure out career wise what you might be interested in actually doing, because career is a big part of most people's lives. And so hopefully you find something that is more than just tolerable. So to use myself as an example, in our firm, we are divided into business lawyers, litigation lawyers, labor and employment lawyers, et cetera, et cetera. That's our skill set. We are also divided into industries. So power, mining, retail and consumer markets, you name it. We have a number of industries that we focus on. And so we are also experts in the industry. I work in a bunch of different industries just because as a litigator, you get to, there's all kinds of things that happen. But one of my focuses, as I talked about at the start, was retail and consumer markets. Well, I fell into retail and consumer markets because frankly, that's the stuff I like. I walk into a shopping mall and I love to look at what's the product mix and what's the selection. I wonder if this chain is really going to make it. And that's interesting. These people are now, shipping or receiving things from Vietnam, and and how does that work? Nobody likes to go shopping with me, by the way. But or when I'm in other countries and I look at different brands and I think, well, I'll bet you that brand's going to come to Canada, or this will fit. And that's the kind of business stuff that you start thinking about. And so when clients call and they say, I'm thinking about coming to Canada, or I'm exploring what's going on in the industry before I make an investment, we can talk about that with them, and we can give them advice on that. In the same token, as a litigator, it comes right down to, if you know the players, you know the industry, you know how it works, you can ask better questions. You can defend your client better. You can get into some really exciting cross-examination because you actually know how the sausage is made. And that's what makes you different. And hopefully you can serve your client better in that way too.
Yeah, I think there's this idea of curiosity that also came up yesterday. And I think it probably will end up coming up again later on today. And it's, I think, something really, and a very important skill for youth and just people in general to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a few other Q&A questions. One is, what do you do if someone at your work talks down to you? If they don't respect you or simply won't cooperate with you, are there any things that you do?
I'm sorry to hear that, first of all. And so we don't have, this isn't interactive, so I'm going to throw out a few questions or assumptions. I'm going to assume that there's someone else you might be able to go to. But before you do that, if someone is talking down to you at work, I wonder if there's a way you might be able to confront or talk to the person, but not confront it in a don't talk down to me way. But to use an example, if you're in a work environment where the person has said, this memo you wrote or this email you wrote is crap, it's just so bad, were you born yesterday? Then I think the answer to that is, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm not even sure I would apologize, but in any case, what is it about the memo? So taking it out of you're crap and you're stupid and I'm so important because I'm saying this ridiculous stuff to you. What is it about the memo that you think needs fixing? Or how can I make it better? How can I make your life easier? What is it that needs to be improved? Few people who I would say have some sincere intention to be at least a rational person are going to shy away from that. When someone comes to you and says, how can I make your life easier? How can I improve this work product? How can I be faster at, making the coffee, depending on whatever workplace you're in? Most people would respond to that with some constructive help because people like to help people, generally speaking. If that doesn't work, then hopefully there is someone else you could go to. And again, not the tattletaling kind of way, but just to say, this has happened a few times where I feel like there's a misunderstanding or miscommunication in terms of what's expected of me, and I just want to make sure I'm able to do my job effectively. So again, focus on the task or performing whatever it is for the greater good, as opposed to going to that person's manager or boss and saying, that guy's a jerk, I can't stand him, you got to get me on a different shift. Because that also, as the manager, you're not like, you don't know how to fix that, right? Because there's clearly a problem, but you're not really sure what it is. And frankly, if you frame it that way, I feel like whoever's in charge is going to quickly figure out that maybe that person is a jerk anyway, but you didn't have to come right out and say that. Um, and so I offer that without very much more context in terms of one way to deal with that.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I think there's a lot just about being more mature and trying your best to sort of deal with these situations. We have another question, which is about, well, first I would like to add that you had just talked about having a child.
Yeah.
And from the attendee, especially since your work can be extremely high stress, what do you sort of do to de-stress or manage your stress while staying successful at work?
If you know the answer to that, can someone put that in the chat? um, there's any number of things. I don't know what you had a great lineup yesterday. I caught some of it. So I don't know what others have said about managing stress, because I think everybody has stress. I suspect a few people have probably said to you, exercise is a good thing. And exercise doesn't have to be running a marathon. I mean, it can be frankly just going outside and having a walk, which these days is like, for some, is probably the most you can muster. And I think that's okay. That's great. I have one of those home bikes with the screens, and you log on and some other person yells at me for 45 minutes as I pedal really hard. So I do that. My family, obviously, I love hanging out with them. My 5-year-old can actually beat me at chess. So it's a different kind of stress, but I enjoy obviously hanging out and being with them and having projects with them. I believe very much in community. So frankly, even though it sounds like work, the volunteerism piece is a big one for me, and very stress relieving and also perspective changing, because it is very easy in my job. You get into the weeds real quick. And some things that seem very important just because there are big dollars next to it get people really worked up. This is a $10 million problem, or this is a $1 billion transaction. And then people think it's super important. Well, and then you go and sit in one of your meetings for one of your volunteer gigs, or you are, participating in a soup kitchen or something, and you kind of quickly remember what's more important, and what there are some much bigger issues at play that hopefully we can also participate in solving. So, exercise, volunteer. I like to read. Doing other things. Frankly, being curious means I read a lot of different stuff, different newspapers, different magazines, different perspectives, different books. That is sort of my escape from some of the craziness, and gives me some really good ideas when I come back to my desk and think about the problems that I'm supposed to be solving. So I look at the world in sort of 3 buckets. There's my work, there's my family, and friends, and other, which is community. And honestly, some days one bucket is just going to be super full, and other buckets are completely depleted. And the way I try and sort of keep myself sane is just to remember that at least over a quarter, for example, at that some point, the buckets kind of even out. And then I'm going to be okay. If, for example, for 3 months straight, all I have is like the work bucket overflowing, then yeah, I'm going to go crazy. I will burn out and I'll be very unhappy. And my family will probably be very happy with me too. So it's not perfect, but I just try and make sure that the buckets are kind of balanced over a period of time. And that kind of keeps me sane.
Yeah, thank you for that. I feel like that was something all of us needs to hear, and is very reassuring for sure. One more question. This is just more broad. It's about leadership qualities. Do you think that there are some ways or approaches to develop those for teenagers now? Leadership skills specifically.
Yeah, volunteering, working with others. I don't say that to take away from school because I know did you have Joe Cohen yesterday? Um, so obviously, he's got a great story about having gone to Wharton and not finishing, and really excellent, interesting reasons why. So I don't want to overemphasize school in general, but I think school is an important component to giving you some credibility and not just credibility, but a framework for thinking through things. School, I think, particularly because I'm a lawyer, people go to law school and they're like, I went to law school for 3 years and I don't know how to write a will. That you don't learn how to write a will in law school. They don't tell you how to write a contract. They don't tell you how to do anything in law school, actually. But what law school teaches you is how to think about something. And that's what I think most of school is how to think, how to train your brain to think about, to identify problems, solve problems, come up with a framework to do it. Like how you actually do it though, like that's on you. So how you fill that gap though, I think, is doing other stuff, is volunteering, is thinking about those co-curriculars or extracurriculars in your high school and some of those clubs. And that's where you get to pick stuff that you're passionate about, whether it's photography or chess or debate or swim club or whatever. Those are the things where you're going to not only give yourself a bit of an outlet and have something that you really enjoy, but where you build those skills. To put it in practical terms, I can tell you that I was telling you guys about how we do our interview process. When we look at the resumes, it doesn't necessarily impress us that someone went to Harvard for their undergrad, or that they published some paper somewhere in their third year of university. We're interested in the character building. So oftentimes we will pick on you were a server at Earl's for 3 years. How did you deal with a challenging customer? And so if you think, oh, gee, I'm not going to put on my resume that I worked for the city of Vancouver in their cleanup crew for 2 summers because that was the only job I could get and it paid really well. No, that's the stuff you should be putting on there. If you were thinking, oh, I shouldn't talk about how I volunteered at the seniors home because I only did it for 3 months and it's kind of lame. Like, it's not like I was working in the lab and I found the COVID vaccine. That's the stuff that we're interested in because you chose to do that. That shows character. It shows interest. That you're interested in your community, and it shows you must have done something to overcome some adversity for someone. So in my Earl's example, you're going to have a great story about dealing with a difficult, picky customer who wanted to send all the food back and tipped you nothing. That is frankly what it's like to work in law. No, well, it's not about the tipping, but you're going to deal with people who are angry. You're going to deal with people who are acrimonious. And so we want to know, how do you deal with that? And are you ready to deal with that? And if you think that volunteering at a senior's home for 3 months is lame, that's amazing because you could have picked anything to do with your time. You chose to do that. Why did you do that? What did you learn from that? What are the relationships that you made through that? And even if you were forced to do it to begin with, for whatever reason, you stuck with it for 3 months. Well, let's talk about that. So that's why I say think about and focus on the co-curriculars, the extracurriculars, and what you do with the rest of your time, because that's the stuff that's interesting and builds leadership.
Yeah, I think that was very practical, and our audience today, a lot of us are in high school or university, so it's something that we're keeping in mind, and it's definitely nice to know that we've kind of strayed away from just looking at grades on a paper or stuff like that. It's not the only component to being admitted. Yeah.
It's not, and it can't be. I mean, grades are, I'll be very honest, are very important in my world. And whether they should or shouldn't be, that's a whole different question, but that is table stakes for looking for a certain degree of competence. But beyond that, because honestly, there's a lot of good students out there. I think, if you're applying to university right now, you're thinking about that. There's a lot of people with the 3.5, 3.7, 4.0 GPAs out there in the world. So what makes you different? And what is going to make you successful and interesting as a university student? And universities are looking for what is going to make our university more vibrant and who's going to contribute to the university community in a way that's interesting, because there are a lot of 4.0 students out there. So, and so don't judge. I guess maybe that's the last thing I'll say is don't discount yourself. I just joked about the 3.0 or 3.5, whatever. Even if you're not a great student, whatever that definition is these days, don't count yourself out, because there's a lot of there's a lot of qualities that go into making someone a great university student, a great employee, a great lawyer, a great whatever. So let the system work itself out, but don't take yourself out of the system before the process is even begun, because all of you, if you're signing on a Sunday morning to listen to this, you must have some very interesting stories yourself about your own career aspirations and visions. So don't count yourself out.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Lam.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's about all the time that we have today. Thank you so much for answering all of our
Thank you.
questions. Again, it's really just such an honor for us to be able to interview you and have you join us today. And I'm sure everyone in the audience, including us, has learned a lot from just talking to you.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much. This is like a Sunday morning. It's quite early, and we really appreciate you taking time out of like your busy schedule. I'm sure you've got a lot on your hand right now.
Good luck with the rest of your conference, and good luck to all of you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
just